Hello, babes. Welcome to The Life in HD. I am Amy Elizabeth. I'm just going to wait for Liz to hop on. I'm sorry for this lighting. I don't know what's going on here, if you guys can see this. Hello. How's everyone today? When you are hopping on, say hello. Let us know what your human design is. Let us know how deeply you feel aligned right now, where you're kind of at, what's going on. Hello, Elizabeth. Let me add you in, darling. How do I do this again? Hey, hey! I'm having some technical difficulties right now. Bring her on, bring her on. Hello, Lisa. Hello. Yay, she's coming. Oh, ba-ba-boom.
There we go. Oh yeah, we did the hot rollers this morning.
Hollywood. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great as well. How are all of you guys? This is gonna be yay! We can see the comments today. Yay! Oh, thank you, thank you.
Wait, I almost wore the black fringe jacket today. We would have been twins.
Yeah.
Yours has a little more glitz and glam to it.
Yours is with frayed, but very similar.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys, we are ready for today. What we wanted to talk about is really understanding the other through human design, because as much as human design gets to impact you and you get to align, I think we have realized that some of the biggest blessings and biggest gifts that we have received from human design is deeply understanding the other, whether it is Liz, myself, our family members, relationships that we have had, or my kids, friends, like just people's responses. Like we're like, oh, I get it. That's why. Yeah, so that's what we're going to dive into today.
Yeah, that's actually, I think this is my favorite part about human design. This is like the way that it's affected my life in the most tangible way, is that I obviously understand myself, but so many people in my life. And that's been the biggest takeaway, because what it does, and I've kind of touched on this before, it creates a space. Like when you can understand somebody and just give them space to let them be themselves, there is nothing more powerful. That is where people feel comfortable to authentically show up as themselves. And in relationships, that's what you desire, right? Two people who can just fully be themselves and express themselves in the way that feels most natural to them. I think that's where the deepest rooted friendships and relationships lie.
Absolutely. Sorry, I'm like so distracted because I was literally debating between that. Is that that blue jackety denim-y sweatery? Like
it's like the oversized.
I was gonna wear that other one. Like this one or that one. Okay, baby,
we're always connected, babe.
And it's the biggest gift, because when, even speaking the language of human design, people are like, oh my gosh, you get me. And it opens up this level of vulnerability and trust between two people that doesn't need to be necessarily so worked at and so built, because it's just like, oh, I get it. I know that means nothing about me. That's how they operate. And I respect the way that they're showing up, and I respect their decisions. And it just breaks down so many walls that I think before we would try to work so hard to break down, but would never be able to, right? Because the person is the way the person is, or you over please and overcompensate, and then that person's unhappy, right? Like it goes both ways, where somebody, if not both parties, end up suffering.
Yeah, and there can be a really closed-minded way of thinking, like this, like people can get frustrated that people don't do things their way, right? Like, oh, I would never, like, why does she do it like that? Well, she's like that because that's how she's designed, and you don't, because you're not designed that way, And then of course all the conditionings of life come into it. But when you can just be like, I would never do it that way, but I'm not designed that way, and that's okay that they're doing it that way. It's just like, okay, no sweat off my back.
So much trust. So we're gonna start with ourselves. So our history is, if you guys don't know already, Liz and I have known each other since grade 7, grade 8, I guess. Grade 8, I think we officially met.
Yeah, like 21 years ago.
As we say grade 8, like everyone, like, oh yeah, that was yesterday.
So like,
5 years ago. 21 years ago. And we met through my mom, who was the secretary at Liz's school. And Liz was the secretary, like assistant. She'd go down there. Like my mom absolutely loved her. And there was another friend that was there too. And essentially, we had each other.
Wait, when your mom would have to call in sick for the day, I would be pulled out of class and go replace her in the office, which would never happen in 2020. But that was the 90s, baby.
Oh my gosh, that's the best. Responsible Liz. That's how responsible Liz is. Just like, let's go send the student down to take over a job. And yeah, and then from there we met at a dance, and we were very like, we played basketball against each other. Actually, we knew each other well before. Like Liz was like this dainty, long, like basketball player who would just be like, oh. You felt it. It was just like the best thing ever. It was very good.
And Amy was like strong, like short, strong. Do not mess with her. You weren't short, but you weren't like I was like tall and lanky. Yeah.
So yeah, and then going from there, I mean, we developed a really deep connection and friendship. And grade 9 was like, oh my God, best friends to the end, like everything together. And then throughout high school, so deeply connected, like really, really good friends. We've literally done everything together, like the good, the bad, the embarrassing, the censored, all of the things. We've lived together in university years or post-university years-ish, final. Traveled so many places together, all of it. So we have this really deep, innate connection. And when we look at our charts, we understand why. But it's so fun in human design to go back to like, oh, I get that's how she was then. And I didn't realize it then. And it was like, why? I don't get it. To kind of replay life and be like, oh my gosh, that's why you are the way, or you responded or reacted in the way that you did, or made decisions. So for Liz, she's a 4-1 sacral generator, and fully undefined head center, undefined G center, and also just absolutely just such a bright light in everyone's life. And when obviously being a projector, Liz was way more social in high school. Like she was just like knew everyone and would be comfortable with everyone and loved, the social setting and like going out and, just being connected with people all the time, where I would definitely want to retreat more. And now understanding her 4 profile, it's just like the gifts that she'd be able to bring people and connect with people so deeply with, and show up and want to, that's an area where she thrives, and not only thrives, but it's innately important for her to have that. And even when we lived together, of Liz wanting to go out, and I was like, oh, she would have to drag me out some nights, and I'd be like, oh, don't you want to just chill? And no, I don't want to go out. And to understand like why that was so important to her is really transforms the way you view and see moments and memories. And the deep connection she still has today. Like she'll be like, oh, I just, had an hour-long call with so-and-so. I'm like, really? I still talk to her? We just like connected. And not just like a chit chat, like a deep, like intense conversation. I'm like, wow. And like all of that, like the engraving of Liz's connections from elementary school to high school to university to her travels to her lifestyle, like friendship is the core hub of all of it. And networking and being in people's connections, or loving to connect with someone else and then build a friendship off of that. And it blows my mind, because I'm like, I could never do that. But to see those as such strong gifts now, I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's all so beautiful to see it, how it naturally unfolded.
Totally. And it's actually so interesting too with like even with your 5th line, right? Like my mom would always be, my parents in general were always great with Amy. Like they trusted Amy. Amy was like the friend that I could go do anything with, even though sometimes we were getting into trouble. They totally, but they would always, they were just like, they trusted you. You have always had that really dependable, responsible energy. And like you said, like Amy would be like literally like leaning back a little bit, where I'd be like, come on, let's go. And you're like, okay. And like, that's not to say that you wouldn't have so much fun when you were out, but you certainly were more reserved in it all, and just a little more like you would observe, you did a lot of observing, a little more like quiet and just like watching everything going down. And then your defined G center, right? Like you have always had a pull and a path in life, always. And that's where like we could arguably be the most opposite, because I'm just like, but you've always had just direction in life. You've known where you're going. And then I think that mixed with your defined G center, like always a strong, or sorry, not to define G center, defined heart center, always such a strong will. You know what I mean? Like whatever it was, whether it was her heart or her mind, defined Ajna too, but like she was going to do it. And that path was just very clear for you. You were very determined, always going to make it happen. And I actually think when you just talking about the fourth line and then looking at your defined G, I think that's part of what makes us work so well in business together now, because there's different strengths there, and like truly at the core, just who we are. And then I think the biggest thing is that your splenic authority, like if you guys don't know somebody that has a splenic authority, it can be like, what? Like, whoa. like those decisions are made like that. And it's just like, are you sure though? Like, I mean, like Amy said, we've been through everything together. I've watched relationships begin. I've watched relationships end. I've watched her make many big life decisions in over 20 years. And there were certainly moments, and I've always, I don't want to say envied, but admired that part about you and your decision-making process, because you're just like, it's a switch. And it's just that once that decision's made, it's made, done, we're moving forward. And that's just something that I'm like, whoa. I mean, I've learned a lot from it, but it certainly can be shocking. It certainly can be shocking to see a splenic authority make some decisions in life where you're like, wow. And then even living together, like even us, not necessarily butting heads, but like with that defined Ajna, you certainly are fixed in that way. The way that you think about things, the way that you approach problem solving, it's very like, it is very rigid in that way. And I now I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's just so many things that make so much sense.
Oh my gosh. And when you say that about the spleen too, so I went through a big breakup, I don't know, like right before we lived together, I think. But it was like, you were like, well, what do you mean? Like, it's just like, everyone was just like, what do you mean it's over? I'm like, well, it's over. It's done. I'm like, it's done. What do you mean? Why are you questioning? It's done. And then you'd be like, well, like, aren't you going to like still stay in touch? And like, don't you want to like, talk again and meet? I'm like, no.
That's like my fourth line. Like I still like keep in touch with my exes, and we're like, we'll check in at big events and be like, like my one ex just got engaged. I'm like, congratulations, I'm so happy for you. It's like, no, we're done. Chapter's closed. Bye.
And I remember that being just such a big thing. Like you being like, well, you should definitely go meet with him. Like, I just don't want to. Like, no, I don't see a purpose.
No desire.
Like, there's no need. But to see how like, again, like conditioning can come in so deeply, right? If that's like a parent-child relationship where like you should, or you're doing something wrong, versus like a friendship, you're just like, okay, fuck it, whatever. Like it's not like a deeply like, ooh, big situation. But to see how friendships can be so more open-minded and so understanding of like, okay, well, she doesn't want to do it, that's fine, this is how I would do it. But now understanding like that's why, like those connections for you are like lifelines for you. And for me, it's just like, if it's unhealthy for me, like I want absolutely nothing to do with it. Like it's done. So yeah, it's just so cool to witness that. And then your sacral and your sun sign of like creativity, like this has been your entire life, in a way also is very shocking for our whole friend group. So those that don't know Liz, Liz just like left university her final year and was just like, I'm done. Like I'm going and moving with a boyfriend at the time in Ireland. And it was like, we're all like, what? You can't do that. You're like, I can't keep, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this anymore. That's where my heart is, where my soul is, where I want to be right now.
That was my first year. Or second year.
But it was right before final
exams. First semester.
Like it was one big moment where like, just finish. And you're like, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like
it was the end of first semester, and my parents were like, you're like 3 weeks out of finals. But I had so many full year courses that I'm like, I'm not waiting a full year. It's just like the decision was made. I'm like,
and that's like the sacral too, right? Where it's just like instantaneous, like you have to act on it. And to watch that now be so like such a deep trust in yourself and how it led you to where you were supposed to go. And then music was another huge one for you, where you just literally picked up a guitar and creativity like just flowed with being creative and making music. And that led to massive milestones and moments in your life and careers. And then from there, like your own candle business, like everything has just sacral yeses and creativity has been so woven into your life path. And to watch how that all has unfolded, it's so cool to just be like, whoa, you've needed all of those pieces as a generator. You've needed all of those pieces and all of those outlets to get you to where you are now. And it's like, what is this doing for you to where you're going, right? It's so cool to just be like, that's so exciting to be in the moment, let it unfold, and watch what happens next.
Yeah. And I think that it's interesting because there's a shock value to it, right? And I'm sure the same as the splenic. Like I remember waking up the day I made the decision that my sacral is not, I mean, I didn't know it was my sacral then. I'm just like, I've always been like, if it doesn't get me out of bed in the morning, I just don't want to do it. And I got to that place with music and everyone's like, no, no, no. Like I just moved to Los Angeles, went through a whole visa process. Like it was a thing. And I'd put 5 years of my life into building this music career. And people are like, you can't, you're so good at it. You've come this far, like you can't. And I'm like, I'm not quitting because I'm defeated. I'm quitting because I just don't, it's not lighting me up anymore, you know? And even looking back, I remember being like probably 8, and I would always say to my mom, I'm going to move to Los Angeles. And she's like, okay. And even seeing how all of those things have just led me here, like I'm not doing music anymore, but it was definitely the vehicle that brought me to Los Angeles in the States. So it's fascinating to watch your path unfold and just really let that lead you. And even interestingly enough, that my sun gate is gate 1, the self-expression. So that is like my soul's purpose here. But you complete that channel for me. You have gate 8 coming out of your throat. So there's so much of me that feels really safe to be expressed and in your company, in your presence, you know, when we are collaborating.
Yeah, and I think like vice versa on that to complete like my ability to express. It's like just by sometimes I'll just talk to you about something and then it's like, oh, got it, got the vision for it, you know? And it's just that again, that yeah, that safety of just like, oh, we just work. That's just how it is. And it doesn't even need to make sense or mean anything. It's just that energy flows so effortlessly, which benefits both of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's really it's I don't know, it's just fascinating to see when you can get into the depths of a chart and even not even depths of a chart, like just getting into you just someone's energy type and authority and you know, centers and everything. Just watching the people in your life. And I'm sure, you know, having 3 children and watching them, and that's where human design is like so impactful for a parent, because to be able to parent and give them that space to just fully come into their own. And you know, as kids we come in aligned, we come in as our highest version of ourselves. So to be able to give them an environment where they get to grow up and just and you understand them on such a deep level, like that's got to be incredible to watch. And it's like it's got to be so cool when you're like, oh, like Hendrix, you would have already known about human design. So is that like one of the first things you did when he was born? You're like,
I
what is he?
remember like giving birth and they have like this big clock at like you're facing a clock, then it's on the walls, it's like in red. And I literally remember him coming out and like me looking up right away, just in case the nurses didn't catch it. Like the time he came out, it was like 2:02. I'm like, okay, 2:02. Like hold the baby. Like it was so important for me to like have that exact moment because it tells you everything, right? It tells you everything. Even we were talking about Lucy yesterday, who went, she's 3.5, and I took her, she's just like such a busy body. It's like, come for a run with me. She runs everywhere. I'm like, let's go for a run. We did. I was like, I bet she can do a 1K. My brother was like, there's no way. Took her out, full 1K run in 7.5 minutes. And this girl didn't even stop. Like, we could have kept going. But then the defined heart, and I was talking to my dad about it today, and he's like, oh, you know, like, I bet, like, Layla wouldn't have been able to do that 1K run. And first of all, she doesn't have the desire like Lucy does. Like, she just thrives off of that, like, fast movement where Layla is more of that creative outlet, right? And it's just like, oh, I see and I get it and I understand that. Plus Layla having the undefined heart. So if I were to be like, oh, you know, making such a big deal about how good Lucy is at this, like obviously praise and all the things for the good things about each of them. But to witness how Layla's like, she even said, oh, can I go for a run with you next time? I'm like, absolutely. And I'm like, maybe Nana will come with us. So now I'm like, I know how to plan it out where Layla doesn't feel bad if she's not running the entire time because my mom can be with her or vice versa, right? It's just setting kids up for the most amount of success within their confidence and not forcing them to be a way that they don't have to be if that's not where they're going to thrive.
Yeah, and that's just, I can't think of anything more beautiful and powerful to be raising children in that way. It makes me so excited that I get to, understand human design on this level and have it so integrated into my life and my being before I bring kids into the world. And even for my next relationship, I'm like, ooh, like, I get to really understand somebody and know, like, in my last relationship, I didn't know human design at the time, but I'm an undefined solar plexus and he's an emotional authority. And I know for a fact I would have handled many situations differently in terms of communication had I known that. Or, I have I have a defined root and he had an undefined root. And so even just situations where things were getting done and I have a defined heart and I have a defined root. And so in that 11th hour, it's like, watch me go, baby. I have the will, like it's like a competition. I'm like, I will create something impeccable in crunch time. You watch. And for him, that was so overwhelming. Like he would shut down. So now it's like I've had this real life experience to know, okay, so that stress is really, really healthy for me. But if it's starting to affect people in my environment, I probably should start acting as if I have an undefined root in certain circumstances so that I'm not creating that stress and just uncomfortable situation for the people around me.
Totally. Yeah, that's huge. And like what I think you also really realize what's healthy for you and what is desirable for you and what is not in terms of consistent energy that you're absorbing, right? Of like what in a relationship you desire to absorb and what you don't. And even like you love your undefined G center. Like that is something that
That's literally where my mind was going next.
like so what if
that
you were
was
with somebody that's defined and that becomes a thing? Like we all have
I
non-negotiable.
was I was
Like that's a non-negotiable for you. You want to live a lifestyle of freedom
yeah.
and travel.
Here's the thing is that I'm totally fine with somebody having a defined G center if there's space for me to be undefined. I don't want, that's the thing. There was such a pressure on me to be like fixed in my identity and my direct, like, what is your plan? I'm like, it's like, okay, I know that things have just worked, everything just works out for you in life, but like now you need a plan. And I'm like, but why do I need a plan now? Like life has been freaking incredible for me and I've never really had a plan. It's just, everything's just come to me. And that's literally been my whole life. So I've unknowingly let my sacral lead me through my whole life. And I think about that because people have always asked me, like, where does that come from? Is that like um, is that your parents? Is that your upbringing? I'm like, part of me thinks that's my 4-1. Part of me thinks that's just like that. The 4-1, for you guys who don't know, is it's like this kind of bonus life. Like there's a lighter karma to it. So I think because of that, I feel more like whatever. Like let's just do it. Let's just do it. Like we live once. Let's go for it. So I've never felt shame around or pressure to be living. I've lived life my own way my whole life, and all of a sudden at 30, being in this relationship with a generator who was out of alignment, and so talking about this defined G center, it made me feel like I was irresponsible my entire life. And I was like, wow, now it's time. And like the decisions I was about to, like life decisions I was about to make are shocking to me now. I'm like, oh my God, I would have just been setting myself up for more and more misalignment. Where when we were splitting up, you gave me a reading and it was like it was just like, whoa, no. That undefined G center is who I am. I am meant to shift my identity. I am meant to move directions in life. I am meant to not know what's next. I'm meant to surrender to that. And everything is coming my way. And sacral gets to be like, yep, nope, yep. And that it was like the biggest game changer. And I love that I have an undefined G, and I love that you have a defined G, because you help give me so much structure and direction. Like, you're just always a step ahead. So you'll be like, what do you think about this? And now I tap into sacral. I'm like, yep, nope, yep, yep. And then we move.
And how much freedom there still can be when there's that unity of it working correctly, right? And actually, like, our whole motto of like friend, like all of our friends would always say, like, everything literally just works out for Liz. Like, it just does. And life has always just worked for you because you were so innately trusting yourself. So when you started to say things like, oh, you know, I'm going to go do this, and I'm going to try this, and I'm going to do that. And like, but like, you don't like that, you know, like, why are you doing that? Like, I know that's not you, but it was like, oh yeah, that pressure to like define something and try it and figure it out. And you have to do this or else it means something so much bigger than what it really meant for you, which it really meant nothing. You're just flowing with it.
Yeah. And it's amazing now, because I remember a moment where Bree, one of our other really good friends, she was like, everything that he has a problem with about you are the things that make you so unique and so special. And now understanding human design, I'm like, wow, that's so true. And like, I would just be dimming my light if I wasn't honoring my design, you know, and we all live that way. And it's not just like a romantic relationship. That can be our upbringing, that can be our parents, our family, you know, the work that we're in, whatever it is. There, just know that whatever the right path, whatever feels like the right path for you, is the right path for you. It just is. And that is where things will unfold in the most incredible way. And when you honor your design, the universe rewards you for it.
1,000,000%. And I think also just like to drop the expectations on people, right? Like for myself, I'm like, immediately when I'm like, well, why aren't they doing it this way? I'm like, oh, because they're probably not designed to do it that way, right? And it's really like, drop the expectations, live your design, worry about yourself, and witness how you can support or encourage other people to do it their way. And even if they're not in human design, even if they don't understand it, there's so many ways that you can tweak the way you show up to support them in that. Like, my kids don't know all about human design. Like, I use some of the language and stuff, but I'm not going to sit there and like, you know, drill them on it to make sure they get it, but I'm going to lead them in the path and ask them correct questions that are going to support them, right? We don't need to. I think what has happened so much in our world is that we've shamed people and been like, you have to do it this way or else it's wrong, where we just get to be like, oh, I can do something a little bit differently to support the path that's the best for you, right? The path of least resistance for you. And sometimes, yes, it does take a little bit more effort on your behalf, but in the end, it's like breaking down a million more walls or roadblocks that would come up anyways.
Yeah. And I think in understanding the other through human design, it actually saves your energy. You know, like, one of our really good girlfriends here in quarantine decided to get a dog, and everyone was like, what is she doing? What is she doing? This is the worst decision ever for her. But she's a 3/6. So I knew that she had to learn through that. And where I know other friends were like, spent a lot of energy being like, what, you know, different expectations or frustrations in the decisions that she was making, I could just be like, she's going to learn. I know that this is the way that she learns, and that's it. And so I actually was able to save a ton of my energy, not spending time focusing on the quote unquote poor decision she was making, because it was just a lesson, and that was it, you know, and that was her path to take. So you can actually just save a lot of energy by like just staying in your own lane.
And we can't always prevent, even if we tried, right? Even if you all tried and put in, like you said, all that energy and effort.
We did.
It's like, why? Because she needs to figure it out. It's like she has to do it.
Yeah. You know, and that's, I mean, I can think of so many examples now. And even just, it's just when I was home back in Canada and you'd text me, you're like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, well, it's like 7:45. All the lights are out here. We've got about 2 candles on, and my parents are getting ready to go to bed. And you're like, so my dad's a reflector and my mom's a projector. So you're like, oh, reflector projector household. You know, like, there's just things that just make sense, even though, you know, well, I mean, I know human design now, but there would have been a time where I'm just like, oh, my parents are just old and they go to bed at 7:45. No, they're just, you know, but it's interesting because when I come home, my dad always stays up really late with me. And my mom's always like, oh my God, you know, you and your dad when you come home. But it's like, yeah, oh my God, he's the reflector. He's like, you know, he's fully just absorbing my energy, and we just sit and we talk, and the reflectors can really become the other. So we're just like, he's feeding off that sacral energy and he's just absorbing that. And we have the best chats. I mean, those are some of my favorite memories, but it's just so funny because that's just not consistent for him. And I know that now because I know human design.
Yeah. So, and even like your mom maybe being like, oh, I don't understand why, that would happen. It's like, oh, well, this is why, and it's temporary, and he gets to absorb what feels good, right? And that's where he's pulled and led. Yeah. And okay, so HD the Foundations, which you just did last week, is literally all about this. Like, this is like your tool book, your guide to understanding not just maybe deeper layers of yourself, but the other. So tell us a bit more.
Yeah, it was such a great masterclass. And the whole intention behind it was that, when I finish up my readings, people are always like, okay, what is next? And for some people, one-to-one coaching is the next step. For some people, it's diving into MMP or PPP. But there's a lot of entrepreneurs in this space, and there are a lot of coaches and a lot of people who are leading other people. And human design is, in my opinion, the best tool and system to be able to lead others. So I wanted to create HD the Foundations for just a really, a really obvious next step for people who are desiring to learn more about every energy type. I fully dove into each energy type, how that energy works, how they're meant to be using it, their strategy, and then all of the authorities. So you can kind of piece it together, because I was saying this last week, how you would lead a mental projector is really different than how you'd lead a splenic projector. They just operate differently. Like, not all projectors are created the same. Not all generators are created the same, an emotional generator, all of that. And that was it too, right? Babes of HD is so detailed. It's a freaking incredible, incredible course. But there are people who are like, I just can't dive in there yet, but I really want to know a lot, but I don't want to dive in there yet. And that's where HD the Foundations came in, and of course, like I said in stories last week, of course you can find this in a book, but there's something really magical about just having somebody teach you and digesting that information in a way. It just, oh my God, I was just going to use a TikTok reference. I was just saying it hits different, but it does. It's like what all the kids are saying, but it does. It does hit differently. You can absorb things differently when you're being, just taught in a different way. That the information just digests in a different way. So yeah, it's amazing. It's just kind of like you have those three pieces. Like that is the foundation. Those are the foundations of human design. No matter what, when you are out of alignment, that is always what you're coming back to 100% of the time.
Always. And that, like, that you have to know that, going above and beyond that is like, the sprinkles on top. But if you don't know how to lead or guide or understand those pieces about someone else, the rest won't matter. It won't matter until you get this down pat. So it is so huge, such an important piece of somebody's journey and steps into really deepening their HD experience for themselves and for others. And it's up for replay. So there's also incredible PDFs that come with it. It's like the whole package. You can get books. You also can leave books on your shelf. You can also dive into this within 2 hours and go back and just like switch to where you want to go and listen to it, because convenience is lifestyle, right? Like, let's be real.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I didn't include, but it was for the other, right? It is for, like, even if you're just like, I'm not a coach, but I really want to understand my kids or my partner or whatever it is, my mom, my dad, it's just understanding. And then again, with that understanding, you get to create space. There's just like, oh, that's who you are. And that's the most powerful thing.
Amazing. Okay, well, we're going to wrap it up because I have PPP in 10 minutes. So I got to go pee. And thank you guys for being here and listening and watching the replays. And we'll be back in 2 more weeks for episode 3. And yeah, it's just been like, honestly, like, I just love witnessing more and more about you, Liz, and even Jess, and how we in unison just really work with our desires and our talents and our skills and what we're good at, and we drop what's not, because there's always someone else that is willing to pick it up. And I think that's also part of this magic, right? Like, let's be smarter, let's be more efficient, let's ditch all of the shit that makes us feel bad or drags us down or steals our energy, and let's rearrange things in the right spaces.
100%. And like literally witnessing you, obviously, for over 20 years, going from being the timid projector who was living in a sacral world, who was like, I'm just built in a different way, and to fully stepping into your projector power, it's the best. I mean, everybody watching is like, yeah, we know, we feel it, but it is amazing. And I'm just like, I'm so grateful for you for introducing human design into my life, and just that we get to do this together. Like, it's the coolest thing
I
in the
love
world.
you. And honestly, watching
I
you
love you.
literally honor your sacral and all of the pieces, you're 4-1, like being so like on your definite path and like understanding that you just operate in a different way between sacral, your undefined G, your spleen, like all of the pieces of you that are just very uniquely you. I love. So I love you. I'm so grateful for you. And that is it, you guys. Thank you for joining us. Life in HD. We shall be back and even better next time. Love you guys.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.